Hello, and welcome to my podcast with your host, Mark Chatterton. Today, I would like to welcome onto the show Steve Taylor, a psychologist and prolific author who lectures at Leeds Beckett University in the UK. Amongst his books are The Fall, Waking from Sleep, The Leap, and Extraordinary Awakenings. His latest book, which we'll be talking about, is called The Adventure, which is a practical guide to spiritual awakening. So a warm welcome to you, Steve.
Hi, Mark. Great to see you again.
That's right. I was at the book launch for The Adventure in London a few months ago and enjoyed the evening tremendously. I mean, what's been the reaction to your book?
It's had a good reaction so far. It seems to be going down well. People seem to be appreciating the fact that it is very practical,
Yeah,
and it's quite. I try to make it quite methodical, and it seems to have gone down well as far as I can tell.
that's good. Okay, because I know in the book you go through sort of eight main points of reference for spiritual awakening. Um, what made you choose these particular eight things? Because I know some people might argue that they're influenced a little bit by Buddhist and Hinduism traditions.
In a sense, it wasn't really my choice. It was based on my research. So,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
as
yeah,
a psychologist, I kind of one of my special areas is to interview people who've undergone spiritual awakening,
yeah.
whether it's a gradual process or whether it's a sudden or spontaneous event. And these are the main qualities which people keep mentioning, which people keep describing. So, like gratitude, for example, this all-encompassing sense of gratitude, a sense of acceptance, awareness of their own mortality, um, and also, being free of psychological attachments. So I was really only focusing on the characteristics which people mentioned in relation to their awakening experiences. But I mean, I'm not saying that these are the only eight characteristics of awakening. There are other characteristics, obviously, but these seem to be what I call them the primary characteristics, because there are lots of other characteristics which kind of emerge from these main characteristics.
Yeah,
And another
I was
consideration was that, sorry.
sorry, yeah, I was reading in. I think you did an article in Psychology Today about research that you were doing. Uh, I don't know how many years ago, and you had about sort of 24 different characteristics, and you did you interviewed so many 700 people or so on, and you whittled it down to about 19 in the end. Do
Mhm.
you still use that system to measure it?
Yeah, I do. But as I say, some of those characteristics emerge from the primary characteristics, and
Yeah,
there are also one or two characteristics which are really fundamental in awakening, like the transcendence of separation,
yeah.
um, or having a quieter mind. But even that tends to emerge from a process of disidentifying from the ego and from an altruistic connection to other people. So even the sense of transcending separation is a characteristic which emerges from other qualities.
Yeah, because a lot of people would say I'm awake, not just necessarily in a sort of spiritual sense, but perhaps, say, in a conspiracy type theory sense or
Mm.
in a political sense or whatever. Um, what what makes spiritual awakening different from all these other forms of awakening, if you like?
It's just a different usage of the term, and it's also when they talk about being awake, it's in quite a limited sense. One of the things I try to emphasize in my work is that I define awakening as an expansion and intensification of awareness. But there are lots of different forms of awareness. That there's perceptual awareness, which
Yeah,
is your basic awareness of your surroundings and of the world around you. That intensifies in awakening, so that the world becomes more beautiful and real. There's also what I call subjective awareness, which is our awareness of our own being.
yeah,
So in awakening, we discover new depths of our own being, new energies and potentials inside us. There's also what I call intersubjective awareness, which is our connection to other people. So that manifests itself in increased empathy, increased compassion, and so forth. So there are, I guess what defines spiritual awakening is that it's very wide-ranging. It's a very wide-ranging expansion of awareness. When people talk about being awake in a political or in relation to conspiracy theories, they're mainly talking about intellectual awareness or conceptual awareness, which
Mm.
is something different.
Yeah, yeah. And I would suppose a lot of religious people would say, I'm awake. I've had an awakening experience. Say within Christianity, you might have a conversion experience, or in
Mm.
Buddhism, you achieve a light enlightenment and so on. Would you say that spiritual awakening is different than these, or it encompasses some of those ideas?
It's different from the awakening which born again Christians experience or which they talk
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
'Cause again,
yeah.
that's a kind of conceptual awakening.
Right.
It's like taking on certain beliefs and realizing that the beliefs are true.
Mm,
It's like, accepting that Jesus is the Son of God and that he died for your sins. So it's not really experiential, it's kind of intellectual or conceptual. So
yeah,
again, it's quite a limited form of awakening. I
yeah.
think that's why in research on born again experiences, the research suggests that they're not very stable. They don't tend to last for a long time.
Right.
Sometimes they do, but in many cases it fades away after a while. And that's because it is conceptual, because your beliefs can change easily.
Yeah, yeah,
But in spiritual awakening, it's not. When people undergo a transformational identity, which is equivalent to a spiritual awakening, it's usually permanent. It doesn't fade away because it's not just an idea. It's not just a belief. It's a
mm.
wide-ranging, deep transformation.
It's a sort of way of life, perhaps. I don't know if that's a good description. Or, it's
Well,
a change of your life in a way. Yeah,
well, it manifests itself in
yeah,
changes in your behavior and in your attitude to life. But yeah, I think that those changes in your way of life, they emerge from the fundamental change inside you,
yeah,
the
yeah,
change in identity, the shift in perspective, the shift in relationship to other people and to nature, and so on.
yeah. And when you say that it's sort of permanent and it sort of lasts for the rest of your life, um, what's the next stage, if you like, when if you've achieved this spiritual awakening, where do you go from there?
There is no next stage,
Right.
maybe until you die.
Yeah, yeah,
And
sure.
maybe there's another
Yeah.
stage. But no, I don't think there's an end point to the journey. It's
So it could
a
be
never
anything
ending.
to any person then, really.
Sorry.
It could be whatever that person interprets it as.
Well, I mean, it's a never ending journey of expansion and deepening. So
Mm,
you keep exploring. Your awareness keeps intensifying. It keeps expanding. You keep getting deeper and deeper insights into reality. But I don't think it ever ends. It's just an endless journey, an endless adventure.
yeah.
I interviewed a man who had he underwent a spiritual awakening at the age of 29.
Mm,
By the time I spoke to him, he was 91 years old,
mm,
and he spent like 60 years at that point in an awakened state. And he was a spiritual teacher, a very respected spiritual teacher. But he said, even now, after 60 years, there's no end. I keep discovering new things. It's
mm.
still an exhilarating journey. I keep uncovering new insights and having new adventures. So yeah, I think it's a never-ending journey.
How does the idea of people who is, you might say, psychically gifted, they can say mediums or whatever, or people who see spirits or loved ones that passed on, is that a separate thing to being spiritually awake, or is it a part of it, would you say?
It can be a part of it. It can be separate. I mean, there are lots of spiritually awakened people who don't appear to have any of those abilities or experiences.
Right.
But but I think on balance, when people undergo awakening, it makes them more open to those type of
Yeah,
experiences.
yeah, sure, yeah,
But there doesn't seem to be a direct equivalent. I can't say for definite that spiritually awakened people gain psychic powers.
yeah,
Doesn't seem to be as simple as that. But I think they're more likely to have psi abilities.
mm,
Um, I think it's once you transcend the separateness of the ego, and then you become open to a lot more. You become more creative. There seems to be a strong relationship between creativity and spiritual awakening.
yeah, yeah,
So you'd expect that you would when people become open in that way, you'd expect them to be open to psi abilities too, or to anonymous states of consciousness. But and I think they are, but not for some reason there doesn't seem to be a strong or direct relationship.
right. And a lot of people, obviously, once they're spiritual awake, tend to get into meditation, and their attitude to the whole world changes. Um, is is that sort of something you have to do, or is it just that people tend to like doing it? It just sort of flows from the experience.
Well, I mean, meditation is a great practice which can lead to awakening. Is a
Yeah,
great way of opening, the doors of perception. It's a great way of softening the boundaries of the ego. So I think if you meditate regularly for a number of years, it's bound to have some sort of awakening effect,
yeah, yeah,
and it can also bring about temporary awakening experiences, which is when you experience wakefulness for maybe a few seconds or a few minutes, then revert to your normal state.
mm,
Meditation can help in that way too. And I think once people attain awakening, they love to sit in stillness.
yeah,
They love
yeah,
to do nothing. So yeah, that's probably one of their favorite occupations, just sort of being alone with themselves, not doing anything in particular, sitting in stillness.
because I notice in your book, you put quite a few meditations within it, and that's sort of to help people presumably get further along the path to spiritual awakening.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, all of the exercises in the book are designed to cultivate awakening. And the book really grew out of workshops that I used to lead and
Yeah,
still do
yeah,
occasionally.
mm,
After my early book, The Leap, came out, I held a lot of workshops, and I realized that I couldn't just you can't just talk about spiritual awakening. You have to allow people to experience it. You have to
yeah,
encourage people to experience it. So I developed all the exercises and practiced them in the workshops to enable people to have glimpses of awakening. And
mm,
it was helpful because practicing them in the workshops, it allowed me to find out which exercises were most effective, and it made me realize how to make the exercises more effective. So
yeah,
that's why the book became, had such a practical emphasis.
yeah. Because obviously, for some people, it's sort of almost like a spontaneous thing awakening, and other people, it takes a long, long time. Why is that?
Yeah,
Why is there a difference between people's way it happens for people?
that's a good question. I mean, you're right. For many people, that they experience a sudden awakening without knowing anything about spirituality, without ever having meditated, without knowing anything about Buddhism or Taoism or whatever.
Mm,
But usually that happens after a long period of psychological turmoil or trauma.
mm,
So it sometimes happens after a diagnosis of cancer, a long period of depression or addiction, maybe a bereavement.
mm,
Really, any intense period of trauma has the capacity to bring about a sudden spiritual awakening,
mm.
because a long period of stress or trauma can break down the ego. And
Yeah,
when the ego breaks down, in some people, a new self seems to emerge to replace it. A kind of spiritually awakened self
yeah,
emerges inside them. So that can happen, and I think it happens more often than most people realize. I think there are lots of spiritually awakened people amongst us who've undergone a shift after a long period of trauma or
Mm.
turmoil. Maybe they don't define it as a spiritual awakening. Maybe they
Yeah,
don't
that's
know
what I was
anything
going
about
to
it.
say. Some people don't even realize it's happened to them, perhaps,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Or maybe they will realize at some point, maybe they'll stumble on a book, like a
yeah.
spiritual book, or maybe go
Mm.
to a talk and realize, oh, this is what's happened to me.
Hmm.
But yeah, but that is fairly rare. I mean, as you say, most people undergo awakening through a long process of practice or following
Yeah,
a
yeah,
particular path. Yeah, that seems to be the most common way.
yeah. And um, I noticed the book is called The Adventure. Why didn't you call it The Awakening, if you like, in a way? What's the purpose of calling it The Adventure, perhaps?
Because I guess it's because in the book I use a metaphor of a landscape and a journey
Right.
that um, I compare spiritual awakening to exploring a landscape of intensified human experience. And once you enter that landscape, then everything changes and your life becomes richer, and you're experiencing new states of consciousness, new relationships to other people. And it is literally an adventure because it's so exhilarating, and
Yeah,
you were exploring this rarefied, exotic landscape, and your life does become an adventure. So
yeah.
I guess that's why, yeah, that's why I use the term adventure, because it's a very accurate description of the life that people lead once they've started to undergo spiritual awakening.
And I suppose using the word spiritual for a lot of people, that and they might start the alarm bells ringing and say, "Oh, that's religious." But I presume you would say
Mhm.
spiritual isn't religious at all. It's something completely different.
Yeah, I mean, I think essentially spirituality and religion are different,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
often they do merge. There
yeah,
are lots
yeah,
of I've met lots of spiritual Christians, spiritual Muslims. Any often religions can provide a good framework for spiritual development,
yeah, yeah.
but just as easily, there are so many religious people who are not spiritual at all.
Mm.
Usually, they're what we call fundamentalists.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
People
yeah.
whose minds are filled with a rigid ideology,
Mm.
and that they're usually filled with animosity to people who don't believe what they do.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
usually feel this strong impulse to spread their beliefs to others. A bit like it's almost as if they're building an empire.
Mm.
But yeah, so they're not spiritual at all. But in the same way, you can be spiritual without religion,
Yeah,
and I think, particularly nowadays in our kind of fairly secular culture, I think spirituality exists mainly outside religion.
yeah,
And I found in my research actually that most awakening experiences, or you could call them spiritual experiences, occur to people who don't know, who don't follow any particular religious or
yeah,
spiritual
yeah.
tradition.
Mm.
They happen to people who are walking in the countryside. They can happen to people who are, going to a concert. They can happen during sexual encounters, but in most cases they do happen outside normal spiritual practices or spiritual traditions.
Yeah, yeah. What's your view with, people who say they're spiritual and so on, and a lot of people believe in spirit guides or angels or some sort of external force guiding them. Is that, would you say that's part of the spiritual spirit, being spiritually awakened, or is it
It can be,
outside of it?
yeah, it can be. I mean, I'm open-minded about that type of thing.
Mm.
I think it's very possible that there are other entities or beings around us who we are not normally aware of.
Yeah, yeah.
If you look into near-death experiences, for example, it's
Mm.
quite common for people to say that they encounter beings.
Mm.
Sometimes they encounter deceased relatives, sometimes they encounter beings, sometimes beings of light or strange entities who give them information or show them potential future events of their lives. So yeah, I'm open-minded. I think there probably are,
Yeah, yeah.
spirit entities around us that we're not normally aware of. I mean, there are some cultures in the world where it's completely taken for granted, like
Yeah,
indigenous cultures where people sense the spirits of their ancestors around them and other forms. So yeah, I'm very open-minded about that.
yeah, sure.
Or what do you think about that kind of thing?
Yeah, I accept it because I've interviewed so many people and read so many books of people's experiences and so on, and it's such a wide ranging subject. One side you can get sort of angels or spirits, the other side you can get aliens, UFOs, and so on. And I
Hmm.
find that the whole um, using the term New Age as a sort of description of this area, perhaps, that it's so wide ranging that there's all these different belief systems, and in the middle
Hmm.
is the sort of spirituality aspect of it all, really. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think you've got to be
And also the paranormal and stuff like that, the supernatural. A lot of people have had experiences. I've had experiences of that. So as you say, it's not just what you see; it can be unseen things as well. Yeah,
Yeah, me too.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've had sort of psi type experiences too, so I've no doubt that those kind of abilities are or experiences are real.
yeah.
I mean,
And
you've got to be
also,
just
sorry, go
you've
on.
got to be discerning to an extent. I don't think you
Oh,
should
yeah,
accept
yeah,
anything without some degree of evidence or some
yeah,
degree of
yeah, yeah,
investigation.
yeah. You sort of a bit of proof and have a critical mind to not just accept everything that you read or told. Um, with
Yeah.
you know, well, that's another question in a minute. But just getting back to the book, which I'll just show if anyone. That's the cover anyway. Um, what I was going to say is you've also included lot of poetry because you write quite a lot of poems nowadays. Can you say a little bit about how that came about? How is that something you've always done, or is it something fairly recent that you've done?
I did write poetry when I was younger, when I was a teenager, when I was in my early 20s.
Mm,
But I had this instinct to do it, but it never worked out very well. I was never really happy with what I wrote, and eventually I thought, yeah, I'll kind of let it go.
mm,
And for maybe 10 years or more, I didn't write any poetry, or maybe hardly any poetry. But for some reason, when probably about 20 years ago now, um, it just came back to me. I just found myself writing down. Well, I didn't really know that they were poems. Just got writing down lines, got jotting
yeah.
down
Mm,
ideas or phrases.
mm,
And then I sort of realized, oh, these are poems. I'm writing poems here. And then it didn't go away. It just sort of remained with me. It's
mm.
totally spontaneous. Even now I never make a decision to write a poem. It just comes when it,
Yeah, it just flows through you,
yeah,
if you like.
of
Yeah.
its own volition. Just
Mm,
something pops into my mind.
yeah, sure.
And and I think it became because maybe around that time, 20 years ago, I think we'd been through a period of stress. We started a family and had, like young children. It was very stressful.
Mm,
Lack of sleep and
mm,
that type of thing. So I think somehow a bit like we were speaking earlier about how turmoil can kind of bring about a transformation. I think it just sort of triggered something. The stress and turmoil just woke something up inside me, and it
mm.
sort of deepened me. And ever since then, poetry comes very easily to me.
Yeah, sure. And you've got a book of poetry as well, I think. I understand.
Yeah, well, I've published 3 books of poetry.
Or more than one, yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So yeah, yes. And do you ever do any like poetry reading or anything like that? Or
not
just you
really,
just
but
sort of
but
incorporate it in your talks, perhaps. Then, yeah,
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 I incorporate it into my talks.
yeah,
Um, um, but no, I don't read the poems on their own. I've thought about it, but
yeah,
you know, maybe at some point I will. Maybe when my next book of I'm gonna soon I'm gonna start preparing a new book of poetry. I've got a lot of poems which are unpublished and which I've
yeah,
written over the
yeah,
last few years. I'll
mm,
put them together into a new book.
yeah. And I noticed that the adventure is published under Eckhart Tolle's sort of imprint or whatever. What's your relationship with him? Because obviously he wrote the forward to it as well. Yeah.
My connection with him goes back almost 20 years. My first major book was a book called The Fall,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, which is a book of it's a book which is largely about anthropology, about the history of the human race,
Mm,
about the sorry saga of human brutality of the past few thousand years.
mm.
And when I wrote it, I read coincidentally, or maybe not, it was published on the same day as one of Eckhart's books, his book A New Earth, if you remember that
Oh
one.
yes, yeah, which I read. Yeah, yeah.
It's,
I read
and
that
I remember
first,
thinking,
actually. Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, it's
Mm,
a really good book. But I remember
mm,
thinking, wow, this is a coincidence. It was published on exactly the same day. And I read his book and I thought, this is not too dissimilar to my book. It's got similar themes about,
mm,
the
mm.
ego in all the chaos that the ego has caused in human history.
Yeah, yeah.
So I decided to send him my book, thinking that I'd probably never hear anything again.
Mm,
But about 6 months later, I just got an email out of the blue from somebody saying, Hi, I'm Eckhart's assistant. He really loves your book, The Fall. He wants to speak to you about it."
mm,
So he phoned me a few days later, and he said he really loved The Fall and wanted to help me promote it and sort of attract attention to it,
mm.
which was great. He wrote an endorsement for it and put it on his website. So The
Yeah.
Fall became a bestseller as a result.
Mm,
And so yeah, we remained in contact, and a couple of years later, he invited me to Canada to do a kind of an interview or
mm.
a
Yeah.
dialogue for his website. And ever since then, we've remained in contact. I normally meet up with him when he comes to the UK,
Mm,
and yeah, he's a lovely guy. He's exactly like you'd imagine him. He's
yeah.
very gentle and very kind and very peaceful. He's
Mm,
a lovely man.
yeah. Because another person that you've had contact with is Colin Wilson, and
Oh
you
yeah.
wrote in it a sort of book called The Sage of Tetherden down
Oh yeah.
about recollections and your connection with him there. So because I think he's probably one of the best authors of the 20th century with all he's written and so
Ah,
wide
right.
ranging. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I didn't realize you were an admirer of his. Yeah, I'm
Oh
an
yeah,
admirer
definitely.
of
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a bit. I met him. Did you ever meet him?
No, no, but I keep hearing about these people that sort of say, "Can I come and see you?" And he was very open, wasn't he, to allowing people into his home and that. Yeah,
Yeah, he was really sociable, really generous guy.
yeah, yeah,
I just wrote him an email once, and sent him a letter once, and
mm,
he wrote back saying, "If ever you're in Cornwall, why don't you drop by?"
yeah,
So of course,
yeah.
about 2 weeks later, I was in Cornwall,
All
and
right.
I went to see him.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, and he was a great guy. He was really helpful as well. He wrote a really long foreword or introduction to my very first book.
Mm,
So it was really generous of him.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm still it's been probably 10 years since he passed away now, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Something like
sure.
that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah.
I still occasionally read his books.
Mm, yeah.
I,
I've been influenced by a lot of his writing, certainly. Yeah, yeah,
oh
yeah.
yeah. What do you know Colin Stanley who
Yeah, yeah.
publishes?
Who's sort of like his biographer, and he's got all his papers and things, doesn't he? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
He's held a couple of Colin Wilson conferences. I think there've
Yeah,
been
that's
three of
right.
them.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And then finally, you wrote a bit for a sort of paper for the American billionaire Robert Bigelow, who had this um, he had this competition, if you like, for people writing about proof of life after death, and you were one of the sort of not winners, but a honourable mention, I think, and I think you won $20,000 for it. You know
That's right.
how you know were you quite surprised that it got that far, or expecting it to do quite well because of your research, etc. Anyway,
Uh, I thought I had a reasonable chance because
yeah,
there aren't so many people, there aren't so many authors or researchers around the world who are interested in this area. So,
mm,
you know, I thought I stood a reasonable chance.
yeah,
And it was a great experience because
yeah,
you know, we all went to, everybody who won a prize was invited to Las Vegas to
Oh,
the
right.
ceremony.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I met all the other winners, and
Mm,
I met Mr. Bigelow himself. So it was a great experience. Yeah,
mm.
it made me realize that it gave me a lot of connections with other people who were
Oh, yeah,
working in the
yeah,
same
sure.
area.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, it was great. And also, it gave me the incentive to do a lot of research into the question of life after death. So that
Mm,
was really, it was really interesting, a really interesting journey,
yeah,
researching
yeah,
in
yeah.
the area.
Did you ever read the one who won it, the main prize winners, their article at all?
Jeffrey Mishloff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, his was quite original. Did you read
No, I
it? It
haven't.
was
No,
quite.
I've only just sort of heard about this in the last few days.
Oh,
Someone said
really?
about you doing it, and I thought, oh, that's quite interesting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's worth reading. He has a very kind of original approach with a lot of he's mainly an interviewer. He has his own TV. He used to have his own public broadcast TV show in America.
Right. Okay.
So he's
Mm,
done like hundreds of interviews. So he has a lot of links to interviews, and so it's very,
mm,
very kind of
mm.
interactive,
Yeah. Sure.
interesting article.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, I hope the adventure continues to sell well, and we're looking forward to your next book, because obviously you've written quite a few over the last few years. And do you do many talks, or is it sort of mainly through the internet that you sort of publicize your stuff and that? Because
Yeah, I
obviously you're
do.
busy lecturing a lot of the time as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but particularly around this year when the university seminars are finished now, so there aren't
Mm,
any more lectures. So I tend to do talks and go to
yeah.
conferences
Mm,
from in the summer and in the autumn.
yeah.
Um, and I'm just prepared. I've got another book out in November, so I'm sort of
Right.
working hard at finalizing that at the moment. Just going
Yeah.
through the copy edit.
Mm,
So
mm.
so when that comes out, I'll probably do some talks in person related to the book.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. And if anyone wants to find out more about you and on your books, you've got your own website, stevemtaylor.com, I think.
Yeah, Stephen M.
Stephen M.
Taylor.com.
Yeah,
Yes, Stephen with a V,
yeah.
M for Mark.
Because there's several other people with obviously the same name as you and that, but
It's funny. Actually, I was speaking at a festival 2 weeks ago,
mm,
and they'd ordered some of my books to coincide with my talk, but
yeah.
they'd ordered a book by a different Stephen
All
Taylor.
right.
It was
Yeah, I
just
remember
again,
seeing a post you put about that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
So it's quite
well,
it's quite
thanks ever
funny.
so much, Steve, for
Oh, you're
speaking to me,
welcome.
and we'll obviously talk again sometime. But thanks ever so much. Okay,
You're
thank you.
welcome. Thanks, Mark. Thank you.